So can we start off? You guys can introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Hector Paredes, and I'm here in San Diego, California. I'm the father of Eric Paredes, and he was our 15-year-old son who we lost in July of 2009 to an undetected heart condition. So as a result of what happened, what we learned about what happened to him, we started the Eric Paredes Save a Life Foundation. So it's an organization that's dedicated to raising awareness of sudden cardiac arrest, not in our state, hopefully partnering in our nation. It promotes doing heart screenings of youth, placing AEDs, raising awareness that it's the leading cause of death of student athletes, passing legislation. That's just kind of kind of a nutshell of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you don't mind going a little bit more in depth about Eric's story, kind of take us through what happened and if he showed any warning signs before.
You know, our son, since he was born, he was very active. So we have a daughter also who's now 31, and she was 5 years older than Eric, or is 5 years older, and she was always kind of your standard girl in terms of not really overly aggressive. And then we had Eric, and Eric was jumping out of his crib at 6 months. So that kind of led us to finally figure out that he liked contact sports. So Eric played baseball, basketball, and football. Those are his main sports. And then as he became a teenager, he stuck with football and wrestling. He had all of his wellness checks every year. And myself, I was kind of raised playing sports as well. I was very involved in all of his sports. And there was never, ever a sign or a symptom of any type that he had something going on. There were never a lot of the things that we've learned now about the symptoms of sudden cardiac arrest. And like you, I think you said earlier, if someone would have asked me what sudden cardiac arrest, I would have equated that to a heart attack. And now what we've learned that it's not. Sudden cardiac arrest is not a heart attack. So Eric's mom, Rena, is also a registered nurse. So we had plenty of, I guess you could say, cursory health care at home. And so for both of our kids, there were never any symptoms. So on July 23rd of 2009, I was working and decided to come home for lunch one day. So it was a little bit after 1 o'clock when I came in and I found him collapsed on the kitchen floor. You know, first I thought that he was just joking around because he used to try to pretend to do all kinds of stuff with me when I realized that he wasn't. So although I had been trained in CPR, I'd been certified quite a bit because of what I used to do. I'm retired now. Mm-hmm. I did CPR on our son and called 911. And the fire department arrived in just minutes. They're about a few blocks away from my house. And I'm actually a retired law enforcement person, you know, a uniform person. And so, you know, they immediately started working on him and we lost him a few hours later. So that's kind of the painful side of what started this, but also it's the motivating side, right? Like yourself, I think you've been able to internalize that that there's a lot of work out there to be done, and people should know about this, because what we do know about sudden cardiac arrest is that it's, for the most part, it's preventable. You know, if you have an AED available, if you identify that young people have these congenital problems, they can be identified and then they can be dealt with many times just with, you know, oral medication, you know, or a simple procedure.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm so sorry. I found it kind of a coincidence that your son's birthday is on May 3rd, and I had my sudden cardiac arrest on May 3rd. So I kind of sent chills down my spine whenever I read it, which is what initially prompted me to send you an email in the first place. And just looking at all the amazing work you're doing, I know that, I mean, of course, Eric is kind of your driving motivation, but how did it come about? How did you decide, like, I want to make change for this?
Well, that's a great question, to be honest with you. We, again, Rena's mom had a medical background and I had more of an administrative background. So as we started learning what sudden cardiac arrest was, and we started learning how prevalent it was, that it wasn't as rare as I previously kind of thought it might have been. As we looked into it, we met with a couple of doctors. And I can tell you one thing that really helped us, and there's a conference coming up here in January. It's going to be virtual. So it's Parent Heart Watch. So Eric died in July, and we went to the Parent Heart Watch conference in 2010 of January. So that was something that, again, was really informative. And actually for me at that time, it was actually overwhelming for me in what I was able to digest. But it led us down a path that, like you, we wanted to do something. And Eric's mom, Rena, she knew a cardiologist that she worked with, who were in the same hospital, and approached him to see what we could do. And then, we had a series of meetings, and that led to August of 2010 doing our very first heart screenings with a lot of borrowed equipment. And in that time frame between January and August, I kind of got, I guess what was my responsibility is to create our 501c3 and our corporate status. So, and I was very fortunate that I was led to now he's become one of my best friends. He's a retired attorney now, and he created the foundation for us pro bono. In other words, he did all the corporate filings, he did all the federal IRS paperwork, and he just kind of guided me. And actually, Maureen, she helped take us to another level on everything that you see. She's a very, very polished lady. And I say this because in our instance, our foundation has been very blessed that it seems like at every corner, we're always able to find that right person to help us, whether it was an accountant, an attorney, doctors, or simply a lot of volunteers with a lot of passion to do what we wanted to do. And so here we are, as Maureen said, 10 years later, and we've screened, as you saw, over 30 some odd thousand kids, placed 160 AEDs, trained, lots of people in CPR, et cetera, right? So really the key is surround yourself with people that, one, share your passion, and then they bring the skill set that you need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I find it amazing. I mean, kind of your foundation is what we aspire to do in the long run. Right now, we're just starting out, of course. But to look for someone that has done this for quite some time and has been successful in saving a lot of lives, I think. I mean, that's what we want to accomplish too. For kind of like your staff, for, I guess, Maureen, what prompted you to joining this cause?
Well, like Hector said, my skill sets were in marketing. And so I've had a 30-year career in marketing. And marketing is, you're trying to get people to buy or use products or services, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that's, inconsequential, whether they buy jeans or whether they go to these conferences or whether they do or whatever. And I was introduced to the Paredes family and what they were trying to do. And it became apparent to me that, everything that I was doing before was meaningless compared to what I could potentially help them do with this foundation. So, I've never looked back. I think this is probably the single most meaningful thing I've done in my career in the many years since I graduated college. So
yeah, that's amazing. I feel like a lot of people are prompted to make change after they've had some relation to sudden cardiac arrest, which is what drove us. But I think it's even more impactful whenever somebody sees it from an outsider point of view and decides to join the cause that everybody's fighting for.
I just have to tell you though, the fact that so the Paredes and what they do every day to advance this cause, in spite of what they lost, and combine that with all the different families across the country who are part of Parent Heart Watch, for example, to be around this community is just incredible. There just is not a more, compassionate, committed community. And I mean, I'm just so lucky to know them all. And I think you'll find the same, that you are a survivor and you're willing to share your story like that, and something very scary that happened to you. It's very motivating for other people because they see your courage and your strength, and they want to be a part of it.
Thank you. I think it's been almost kind of like a coping mechanism to me, all these great people that are making change for something that happened to me. And I was very lucky that I got to make it out on the other side. But it even motivates me even more to look at organizations like y'all's and just kind of have that support from everybody, even though I don't know half of the people out there that are doing this. Every single time I meet somebody new, it's like instant family. So it's really nice to kind of have that community. So now that you have started this whole thing since 2010 till now, how's it changed your life, both like the event and the foundation that you've started?
I'm going to have to say that it's evolved for me from my initial motivation, and I'm going to have to be honest with you, Juliet. It wasn't all that altruistic. It may seem, wow, what a great thing you did. At least for me, more personally, it was a way to channel my pain. It was a way to stay busy and do something productive. And so that was some of my initial motivation. I really didn't know where we would be. I mean, I did have a vision, and we're still trying to reach that vision. And you've already latched onto it, right? We want to make heart exams with EKGs mandatory for kids. I mean, that we still got a ways to go. We've been at this for 10 years, but we've made a lot of progress. So back to your initial question, I always felt from the beginning, as I started understanding where we needed to go, that we needed legislation, right? You spoke about that, but I knew that would take time too, because of, again, my day job. I had learned a little bit how that worked. Fortunately, Maureen came on several years ago with us and understood our ultimate vision as well. We started kind of everything we do ties into that vision, right? That's the direction we want to go. That has been a feeling of tremendous success because we have been able to pass a couple of laws that are more on the education level, but they're mandatory, at least in our state, for coaches. And that's been really, really satisfying. So it makes me more personally feel that we have covered some ground, because even if we're screening, several thousand kids, whatever, there's still tens and tens of thousands of kids that are not, right? So the goal here is to raise that awareness to every household so that they know about this, and that they can either insist on having their young, kid, their teen, get an EKG, or hopefully have it mandated under certain circumstances, right? So, now the way I feel very grateful to a lot of people, because everything that we've been able to achieve has been because of people like Maureen, and there are many, many people that they really connect with what we're doing. And I'm so impressed with the way you're approaching this, because you have good questions and you're taking good notes in all this. And I think that's going to add to your credibility of what you want to do. And you're going to find, as Maureen said, you're going to connect with people that are trying to do the same thing that you want to do. They might be just a little bit in front of you, but they won't mind, you jumping on with them. And I think Maureen, she spoke about the Cody Stevens Foundation out of Houston. Scott Stevens, Cody's father, Cody was lost, I think, in 2012, if I remember right. And if you've looked at their website, the father, Scott, is a real, my impression, he's about 6'7", just a Texas, barn shaking kind of guy, where he knows a lot of people and he doesn't take no for an answer. You know what I mean? So I strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to reach out to the Stevens family, because they'll be able to offer you, especially in Texas, where to go next.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into it. I think, like you said, we're just trying to reach out to as many people as we can, because, after all, it's a community, and we've definitely felt that. More in the sense that people are, like, you guys are kind of like helping guide us through this whole process, and we're all kind of going for the same combined goal in the end. that kind of leads me to the next question, since we're all, for the most part, here to educate people about sudden cardiac arrest. What is something that both of you, I guess, wish that people knew about sudden cardiac arrest that's not commonly known?
I think the answer is everything, basically. I think people just don't know, what it is. It's just like Hector said. I mean, the most people who've been trained to give CPR don't really understand why they're even giving it. They don't understand that when you have a sudden cardiac arrest, your heart is stopped and you're not breathing, and a lot of people, the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation and Parent Heart Watch collaborated on a 2,000 person man on the street study. And they asked them all, if somebody had a cardiac arrest, would you jump in to try to help them beyond calling 911? And they all said, oh gosh, I don't think I could. Well, when they explained to them, okay, but do you realize that if you don't do more than call 911, that person's going to die? And they said, I didn't realize that. And now that I know, I am more willing to jump in. And so things have come of that. So, this is a national movement that's, I think, started with Parent Heart Watch. Hector, you could probably agree. And it's grown from a grassroots movement of, individual families all over the country into something really, really amazing. And I think that they've created some significant change. So there's so many different resources and campaigns that are coming out of it to try to educate people. One of them is Call, Push, Shock. Kind of like stop, drop, and roll, don't drink and drive, just say no, call, push, shock. Call, push, hands-only CPR, shock, use the AED. Because the other part is people don't know that the AED that's in the facility is for them to use. They think it's for EMS to grab when they get there, but EMS bring their own, right? So it's all of these things, and people think, well, what happens if I use it and I hurt the person? Well, you can't hurt a person with an AED. It won't shock somebody unless it doesn't detect so there's all of these pieces to it, that when I go to the doctor and they listen to my heart with a stethoscope, they must be hearing any problems. If they don't say anything, then I guess I'm fine. All of these things combined are just, in the way of people really understanding what it is and how they can be their own advocate, and we can all help each other. And like you said in the beginning, increase the survival rate from 10%, which has been stagnant there for 3 decades. 3 decades.
Mr. Paredes, what would, I think it's like covered it all, but if you have anything else that you would want people to know about sudden cardiac arrest, what would it be?
Maureen covered it pretty well. I would add, though, that I really don't think that your school administrators, your principals, your superintendents, it's getting better, but they don't realize that it is the leading cause of death, right, of student athletes. It's the leading cause of death, medical reason, on school campuses. So these are the kind of talking points that you can incorporate if you get an audience that say to speak to kids. And of course, your story translates really well into the value of knowing CPR, right? And knowing where your defibrillator is. And if there isn't one around, to have people ask, why not? Why isn't there a defibrillator here? And as Maureen said, there's ample information about the amount of kids that we lose that we could save.
Especially if you think about the fact that there are fire extinguishers and fire drills that are nationally mandated, and a fraction of people are lost to that cause of death on a school campus. So there's every reason to have a plan for cardiac preparedness. So
yeah, I think that's one of the flaws in the system. I feel like a lot of people, if it was more implemented into the school system and actually brought awareness to, which is what I want to try to do in my school, and hopefully for schools around my area and spread that. But like you said, I want to go speak at my school and make sure that they know about this, because I honestly thought it was kind of like something that always happened to older people and not something that could happen to me. And after talking to all of my friends at my age, they also thought that it was like, oh, it's a heart attack or like a stroke, and just it's not something that we talk about yet. It's so prevalent. It's the #1 killer, but we have fire drills every month. So that kind of also sent chills on my spine, because somebody could literally drop in front of you, and none of the thousands of kids in school or administration would know. But if the fire alarm rings, we all know what to do. So I think if it was more implemented, I think in that way we could all make progress. Now that, like I said, you've done this for a really long time, you definitely know what you're doing. What would you say, like some tips for somebody like me that's just starting out to try to make change in our community? What are some tips that you would give, kind of like the small foundations or like people that are trying to bring awareness?
Well, from my perspective, I would suggest don't try to reinvent the wheel. You know, so I would join Parent Heart Watch. There are other young, energetic, enthusiastic survivors like you that are part of Parent Heart Watch, and they're doing some amazing stuff in their states and their schools. Some of these young people like you, I consider you among them now. The fact that at your age, you're thinking this globally, I expect to see you as a CEO somewhere. That's what I have seen with a lot of these young people over the last 10 years of going to Parent Heart Watch and listening to young persons like yourself speak in front of large groups, tell their story, say what they've done about it and how they've made some changes. So, my thought to you would be is to learn as much as you can about what you want to do, identify what your goal ultimately is, and latch on to some ideas that other people, nothing's the same. You're going to have to tweak it for your own community, for your own group and everything. But we're all really working with the same idea. We're just approaching it a little bit differently depending upon where we're at. Maureen, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that's really good advice, Hector. You don't reinvent the wheel. There are so many resources out there and I think the thing about not reinventing the wheel and borrowing all the message points that we are already established is it only helps the cause if we're all saying the same thing. We're using the same statistics and the same information, then it doesn't confuse the public, which is another reason why there are so many different kinds of organizations that say that they're trying to prevent sudden cardiac arrest, but at the end of the day, sometimes we're saying something different and it's confusing to the general public. So there's many of us that can say the same thing. I think the better. And then I think the other thing I would say is, so it took 10 years for us to kind of come to this, other than the laws that we passed, but there's two ways to affect change, right? There's creating models for change, like we've done with screenings and you want to do, and placing AEDs. But then there's also creating systemic change. So because if we stopped screening and stopped placing AEDs, what would change, right? There'd be another gap. So what can we do to try to change the way things are done so that eventually none of us need to exist because it's part of our culture, right? So are there laws that can be passed about EKGs and AEDs? Are there laws that can be passed about or policies in schools about cardiac emergency response planning? We actually just created a CME, which is a medical training module for physicians to help them be better at cardiac risk assessment in their practices. So you figure they're the first line of defense. They're the ones giving the well child checks and the sports physicals, or they're responding to a parent that comes in and says, well, my child feels dizzy a lot or has chest pain. And if they don't know what to do about that to be really robust in their diagnosis, they're going to miss the heart condition that's right there in front of them. Similarly, we're piloting now some curriculum called Smart Hearts Don't Miss a Beat, which it's sudden cardiac arrest prevention curriculum for students. So if we're trying to empower them to be the next generation of lifesavers, right? Or help them to grow up in a culture of prevention. Like you just said, kids don't know what this means because nobody's teaching them. So we tried to put together a curriculum that's beyond CPR, that is all about what is the condition here that's happening and what are you doing to respond to it, all the way from recognizing warning signs and risk factors to knowing that even though no one's talking about it, you need to grow up into your workplaces and communities and families knowing how to prevent sudden cardiac arrest if it strikes someone. So, and those are we're trying to create systemic change those ways. So, in addition to providing services, what can we do that's going to change the entire paradigm? And it's not easy. It's a long-term process, obviously. It's an investment of many years, but we're willing to make the investment. And I think a lot of the other members, for example, of Parent Heart Watch are as well, with different things they're doing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think I saw a video somewhere because my sister and I are trying to get our study up on how to build a nonprofit in the first place. But it's sad that like your goals as if you were not needed anymore. And I think if we could put, well, of course, probably more experienced people in the end could put more laws and kind of make systemic changes, like you said, and not only screening people, which is still very effective. I think eventually, if it catches on, it would probably make the survival rate a lot more than what it is right now, which is in the end the ultimate goal.
It's really funny that you say that, because when I joined the foundation in 2012 and I interviewed the board and Hector and said, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want it to be so we don't have to do this anymore." That's exactly what he said to me.
Yeah, I mean, we want that as well. That's why we're kind of starting this in the first place, or at least to get our community more involved. But yeah, that's the main reason for us just trying to reach out to people who have had success in this. So I really appreciate you guys taking time to talk to me and everything. Is there anything else that you want to add or share?
I'm going to say, again, it's amazing to see young people like you. I mean, it's like, I think back when I was 16, I'm almost ashamed to say that I was just thinking about baseball practice and that my grades were good enough in high school that I could play. And, but so when I see people like young people like you that are really looking ahead, and wow, I wish I would have known more people like you at that age. But I will say, and I've said this to other folks, all the information that we have on our website is for information and education for everyone. And I always encourage folks to please plagiarize what you can from our website if it helps you launch your own. I only say, you're going to have to get some legal assistance and make sure that as you're putting this stuff up, that you're well protected and it's being done in the right way in your state, right? So that's my only thing that I would suggest is go ahead. You can plagiarize some of our language, our verbiage. There's plenty of information up there. Visit others, but plagiarize all you want, okay?
Thank you so much. And as far as whenever you were 16, thinking about your grades, I was the exact same way months before it happened. So I think it just took all this happening for me to kind of open my eyes and be like, wow, I almost lost my life. I have to do something about it now. But I think that's how everybody is, which is why I think, like you said, the systemic changes in schools, like open up your eyes before this happens to you or a loved one. It's probably the biggest shot we all have to make this kind of more well known. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking the time talking to me and kind of giving me some advice and sharing your son's story. I think that's all from my part. If you guys have anything else, Patty and I are both really grateful. But yeah.
Well, we hope you stay in touch. We really do. We really would love to see your progress.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And if feel free to email me direct if you have any other thoughts or questions that that I can help you with. And I think my phone number is, when I respond back, is on there. And feel free to call me or text me, and I'll be more than happy to help anywhere I can.
Same here.
I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I hope you and your family have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You guys too.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.